What's going on, my powerful people? Thank you for tuning in to another video. And for those of you who are new subscribers and new to this channel and maybe don't even know who I am, my name is Venmo Khamesi. I'm a powerlifting coach, athlete, referee, and meet director. So I make videos here on this channel to help out those groups of people. Hope you're all having a good week. I'm a little bit tired. I didn't have time to, figure out what kind of topic I want to do a video on, do research on it, record the video, edit it, everything like that. So I figured, let me just do a Q&A that I've done previously in the past, but find some new questions of, questions that have been asked me directly. So I kind of scoured through my messages to see what kind of questions people asked me, and also just looked around and saw what kind of questions in general lifters are asking. So we'll kind of get right into it and get right into our first question, which is going to be, why do some lifters wear wrist wraps on deadlift? And so there may be a couple of different reasons for it. Some might just be like mental, but the main reason is like they're trying to push on those nerves and those muscles that help keep the hand shut or even close the hand to begin with, to try and basically have a stronger grip. So I don't know if there's any research out there on this of having pressure on those nerves or muscles will help keep the hand closed and have a stronger grip, but that's the general idea, is that sometimes you might even feel if you kind of push on certain parts of your hand right on your arm, that your hand might actually close a little bit, your fingers might close. And so if you make a fist as hard as possible and then wrap with the wrist wraps over there as hard as possible, then you may be pushing down on those things that will help keep the hand closed so that you can hold on to your grip on a heavy deadlift. So that's like the overall idea. But again, I don't have any statistics or research or anything to prove this. I'm just explaining to you what the idea is, that some people have either found it effective, either just mentally or actually physically found it effective. So that's why you'll see some lifters wearing the wrist wraps on deadlift. Other than that, could be some other reasons, maybe just like they like the design, maybe this feels good, maybe it helps make their wrist feel better if they have maybe pain with a lot of weight, maybe they're just doing it for sponsors, who knows. But the main idea is to try and keep that grip closed. And if you watch the IPF Worlds, then you remember from Sweden in 2019 where Maria T missed her second deadlift and looked like she lost her grip, and then the coach for the Canadian team wrapped her wrist really tight for the third attempt, and she came back and was able to hold on to it for an all-out grinder. So all of a sudden her grip really improved and she was able to finish the deadlift and win. So that's kind of like exhibit A to show that it's possible that wrapping the wrist really tight on deadlift may help with the grip strength. So that is question number one. We're going to go now into question number two, and that is going to be basically people asking, how wide should they go for the sumo? So for conventional, most people will think having the legs straight down where your feet are directly underneath your hips, kind of like a vertical jump. That way you're pushing straight down to the ground, creating force that's going to lift the bar straight up. But for sumo, now you're going wider than hip width. So now how do you figure out how wide do you go? Do you use the bar as a guide, like the power rings? Do you go toes to plate? How much force in the horizontal direction do you want to expend in order to now have a wider stance and shorten the range of motion? And with some of these questions, it always depends. So you need to figure out what works well for you based on your current strengths, things that you may want to work on as far as muscular weaknesses, and then your mobility or your flexibility. For some people, they can't go toes out to plates and be able to keep their knees out. They just don't have the mobility for it, and their knees will collapse. And when their knees collapse, they'll kind of push the bar forward and they won't be able to get their hips as active. So maybe their back round. So then for them, a toes to plate stance won't work. So for them, they may need to go more of a narrow stance and try and get the shins vertical in the bottom position and keep the knees out in line with the toes. For some people who are very mobile, or maybe if you're a taller lifter, so having that wider stance is, in relative sense, not as wide as someone else who's maybe 5 feet tall. So for them, they may be able to go toes to plates, be able to get the knees out and get in a really good position with, again, those vertical shins, having the hips close to the bar, keeping the back straight. So you have to test out what works for you. And so if you're making the switch to sumo, start out with lighter weights and try a couple different stances. Go from your conventional and go a little bit wider to a moderate stance. Then go to maybe the shins kind of touching the rings, and then maybe go to toes touching the plates and see how those feel. See how tight it is on your groin, see if you can get into the position, see if you keep your back straight. In general, if you're trying to look from the front at your deadlift, try and get a starting position, like I said, of having that vertical shin. So that means your foot, your heel should be underneath your knee joint, and then your knee should be trying to push it out in line with the toes, kind of like the second and third toe. If the knee's collapsing inside the toes, then you may need to look into a more narrow stance. And if your shin's not vertical, like, your knee joint is different than your heel in one direction or the other one, then you may want to try and bring in, your heel to get it right underneath your knee joint to try that out first. Then you can take the heel further out than the knee joint if you want, which means you're going to have more lateral forces, but you may like that position because you may be able to get your hips closer to the bar and to the center line and be able to get into a more vertical position, and it may be more difficult off the ground, but then it'll be easier at the lockout. Next question we're going to go into is going to be basically asking how many reps to do when you're warming up in a competition. So as you're going from your first warm to your last warm, how many reps should you do? And then again, this is going to vary between person and person, but the general idea is that when you start with your first warm up and go down to your last warm up, you want the reps to go down. Same thing you do in the gym. You're not going to do sets of 10 for all your warm ups and then do your, your 3 sets of 3. You're going to go down from maybe 10 to 5 to 3 to 2 to 1, and then do your sets of 3 by 3 or whatever protocol you're doing. So it's a similar thing in a competition. And part of the reps also depends on if you do any kind of warming up before you get under the bar, because part of the warm-up process is basically increasing your heart rate, getting the blood flowing, getting the joints a little bit more mobile, going through a longer range of motion, basically waking up your body and prepping your body to then handle the heavier weights. The later warm-ups are to honing your technique and get a feel for the weight so that you don't jump straight to 90-92% from 60%. So that's 70, 80, 85% is honing in technique, practicing the competition standards right before the actually going on the platform and doing the attempts and feeling that weight. But from that, empty bar to 60, 70% is warming up your body. So if you're doing a lot of warming up beforehand, maybe you do less reps once you get to the bar. Maybe you do 5, 3, 2, 1, and then the ones rest away until you're ready to go. If you don't do anything, maybe you want to start with empty bar, 8 or 10 reps, and just loosen up, go full range of motion, maybe pause in the bottom, wake yourself up since you haven't done anything beforehand. Typically, I like to do the empty bar for lifters between somewhere to 8 to 10 reps, again, depending on if they do any warm-ups from beforehand. And then from there, just drop down the reps. So maybe, the second warm-up will be 4 to 6 reps. The third warm-up will be, 3 to 5 reps. The second to last or third to last warm-up will be something like 2 to 3 reps, and then the last warm-up, the second to last warm-up, and maybe even the third to last warm-up will all be singles, because at that point we're just practicing exactly the competition, just singles for those last warm-ups to get ready for those attempts. All right, we're going to go to our next question, and that is going to be basically how to increase your training frequency. So if you're already doing, let's say, 2 times a week squatting and you've been doing that for months, maybe years, and you want to try out 3 times a week squatting, how do you make that transition? Or same thing for bench press or deadlift. And oftentimes people will try and push the bench press first, since that one you can recover faster. So you may be, benching 2 times a week and you're like, oh, I feel really good. Go to 3 times a week, like, man, I still feel good. You can go to 4 times a week. So how do you transition? So the way I usually like to transition with people is to start off slow. And starting off slow would be not only in the amount of volume that you're doing, but maybe even the range of motion. So you may start off with some kind of partial range of motion, or you're going to start off with a very low volume and intensity. So for example, if you are doing the competition bench press 2 times per week, let's say you do a 5x5 day and a 5x3 day. You don't want to just go in and add a third competition bench day in and do like 5x7, 5x5, and 5x3, because now you're just adding so much volume in. All of a sudden it's going to be a big jump and it's on the same lift, and you may not be ready for it. You may not be able to handle the volume. You may, get really fatigued and maybe fail towards the end of the week, or maybe you just feel beat up. Maybe you tweak something, so you want to start off lighter. So you may start off with like a partial movement, like a floor press or a board press, so you're not stretching the bottom position as much, because in the bench press, that bottom position usually tweaks people's pecs or shoulders, something like that. So take that movement out. First focus on adding in more volume in the top position. So you do maybe a 2 board for 3 sets of 3, add a little bit more volume in a partial range of motion, and then once you've done that for a few weeks or maybe a couple months, then you maybe switch that to the competition bench. Or if you want to do the competition bench, then again, just start off with less volume or less intensity as well. So you may start off with another day of 3. So you did your 5x5 and you did 5x3. Now you're going to do another day of 3s, but you're going to do less volume and less intensity. So you might do 3x3 and then maybe take, 90 or 80% of what you did for your 5x3 and do it for that 3x3. So again, it's just like an active recovery. You're just practicing your skill. You're doing less volume and less intensity of the 5x3, so you're capable of doing it. You can even make a little bit of variation if you want. So for some of my lifters, I'll put a 2 count pause bench in there and do 4x2 or 3x3 or 4x3 and really drop the intensity down. So now instead of doing a 3x3 at, let's say, 80%, you're doing a 3x3 on the 2 count pause bench at like 60%. So you're really focusing again on technique and active recovery, and not focus so much on dropping in a ton of volume and a ton of intensity all of a sudden in 1 week. So then that way you're slowly transitioning from either that partial range of motion or very low volume and intensity, and maybe you build that up a little bit for like a 3 or 4 week cycle, and then maybe then you could transition to putting it into a full competition bench. All right, we're gonna go into our next question, and that is gonna be basically free program recommendations. So people are always looking for free templates out there, free cookie cutter programs out there. And so there are a lot out there, good ones and bad ones. So oftentimes people are not just asking for free stuff, they wanna know what is the best of the free stuff. So there's a number of different ways that you can go find these programs out there from looking at different coaches out there. For example, me, I have a few free programs on my website. So if you go to my personal website, powerliftingcoaching.com, and then you go over to free stuff, you'll see I have a number of free programs on there. And I've made videos here on this channel, which breaks down basically how I design the program and how you can make adjustments to it. So you can go watch those videos as well to see the purpose of the program and how you can adjust it for you. So you can tweak it a little bit if you want to, fit you a little bit better. And I have different options as far as frequency and the level you're at, and whether you're just off season or peaking for a competition, so you can check those out. Below those, I also have a number of free resources of just different articles and videos that can be helpful. But also under RTS, I do have the RTS program on there linked, and I believe the link still is active and works, so you can check out the RTS free program right there. But another option, if you want to see basically a lot of free stuff out there and figure out which one fits you as far as the number of training days, the frequency, what your goal is, that kind of stuff, you can also check out liftvault.com. So that person, whoever it was on liftvault.com, collected a bunch of programs, and he basically has a program finder, so you can figure out whether you want to train 4 times a week, 5 times a week, whether you want to do bodybuilding, strength, whether you're peaking for a competition. You can go and put in what your needs are and see what the options are for your needs. And then from those options, you can go and check them out and see which ones you like. Do they have accessory work that you want to do? Do they have variations that you want to do? And are they right number of weeks that you want to do? And basically go from there and pick. And I believe it has a rating system on there, maybe some reviews, so you can go in there and see what other people will recommend, which ones are good or not. So there's a lot of stuff on there, I believe, as far as Calgary Barbell's on there, and I believe Johnny Candio's on there, Jim Wendler's 531's on there. So a lot of more well-known programs are on there that you can go check out. So that covers as far as the Q&A for today. Hopefully you all like that. If you ever want to see any of your questions answered in future Q&As, as always, you can comment those down in the comment section below, or you can check out my description, which has my email, my Instagram, that kind of stuff, if you want to just directly message me and make it a private question rather than a public question. But other than that, I hope you guys are having a good week. If you want to see some other videos, you can check out those videos right here, and I'll see you in that next video.